Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, envies of all ages, welcome once more to the best, and probably only, daily October horror video essay marathon, Wholesome Halloween! Before we get started on today's video, I just have a few things to get through. Firstly, introductions. As always, I am your ghost of a host, your bony broadcaster, your maniac master of ceremonies, Dan Drambles, here today and every remaining day of this month to present you through the third iteration of this saga of screams, as I bring you Wholesome Halloween 3, a celebration of horror. This year's Anything Goes theme is going to see me tackle all kinds of horror throughout this month, from the old to the new, the kitsch to the classic, the entertaining to the evil, and the fantastic to the frightful. Nothing is off limits, and as always, in that wholesome Halloween spirit, we'll be looking at every one of these horror creations through a lens of celebration, coming together as a community to find the joy in the wide spectrum of varied output found in this all too often misunderstood genre in one final Wholesome Halloween spectacular. And yes, my friends, I did say final. We're ending this series on a trilogy. For reasons I'll get into at the back end of this marathon, this will, I'm sorry to say, be the very last time I'll be your skeletal celebrant in this capacity. But before you feel as sad about that as I do, you should know that because this is the last Wholesome Halloween ever, my plan is to make this one a little extra special. I'm going all out on this thing, and I'll have some unexpected surprises along the way. But even more importantly, in the spirit of the wholesome vibe this whole thing started on, this has always been a series about spreading positivity after all, I plan to make this one, hopefully, maybe do a little bit of good in the world. I have to say, it's always an honour to be back in the bones, but that's especially true this time, as this whole month, every single video is going to be released in support of Trans Lifeline, a charity which provides direct emotional and financial support to trans people in crisis. On every video uploaded this month, you will find a donate button that lets you donate direct to the charity, and they will receive 100% of that money. But that's not all I'm doing. On top of your personal donations, I will personally be giving 100% of any ad revenue and Patreon money I earn this month to them as well. And I'll also be selling these limited edition Dan Drambles special Wholesome Halloween t-shirts. Look at that. Look at this. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Features an incredible illustration by the talented Alec Hugel, who's done a whole boatload of designs for a bunch of big pro wrestlers, and who I'm honoured to have now illustrate this shirt as someone who was already a massive fan of his work. This will be available for pre-order the whole month of October, and so long as I get enough orders for the minimum print, I'll be doing a full print to ship out starting November 1st. And, you guessed it, any penny on the profit of these sales is obviously going to be going 100% to Trans Lifeline. Just to be clear as well, this isn't even the final shirt, this is just a quick mock-up so you can see the awesome design. Our final print will be a higher quality screen print with a larger surface area covered and printed on an ethically made, organic and PETA approved vegan shirt. My planned supplier didn't make this shirt as they require a large minimum order up front, which is why we're taking pre-orders on these, and just to be clear, it's no risk, as if I don't make the minimum count to make this profitable for the charity, I'll just refund you all. But they did send me this one. And honestly, not just saying this, this is like the comfiest thing in the world. Assuming everything is all set up right now, and hopefully it will be, the shop to pre-order your shirt is available in the description below. I also have some cool extra bits and bobs to talk about, as there is a lot going on my end at the moment, but we can get to those at the end of the video. So yeah, very, very, very special Wholesome Halloween this year, and one I'm extremely proud to be bringing to your adoring eyeballs. But that's enough yammering. I think we've all become once again acquainted with each other enough, wouldn't you say? So let's kick this thing off. But what to start with? Ignore that, don't ruin the surprise for yourself. The first Wholesome Halloween started as something for everyone to do during the COVID lockdown. I was just putting out something daily to try and do something a bit fun, you know? Just something to break up the monotony, give a few people something to look forward to each day, and make an awful time a little less awful. So it only seems fitting with Wholesome Halloween 3 that we should come full circle and revisit that awful time with a lockdown movie! Yeah! Quarantine! Woo! Host, directed by British filmmaker Rob Savage in 2020, is an incredibly interesting film for a multitude of reasons. While not the director's first feature, that would be the ultra-low budget Strings from 2012, it was his first feature in the horror genre, an area he'd previously only worked on in a couple of short films. It also marked his huge breakout success. After Host, Rob would make other features, and only 2 movies later, he's on to making big budget Stephen King adaptations with wide theatrical releases. Needless to say then, Host did pretty well for the guy's career. That's not totally unusual. Well, not common by any means. A lot of small filmmakers might get big work off the back of a small first film or two doing well, but with Host, it's a little bit more surprising when you consider this film that has launched a, so far, very successful horror career was made over Zoom. Oh yeah, this is a real lockdown movie. I'm not talking a film that's thematically connected to the lockdown in a way something like #Alive might be. I'm not talking about a film that uses lockdown as a setting like 2022's Sick. I'm talking about a film that was literally Rob directing his friends over Zoom while they all quarantined at home. This film is told in its entirety through one extended 57-minute group video call. You would think perhaps that while a good film could maybe be found with such an obtuse setup, it might be a little difficult to pull in any truly big scares or create a tense atmosphere with such a limited toolset. But as this video title notes, Host is the scariest film ever made according to science. Isn't that wild? So you probably want a bit more context on that, right? What does scariest movie ever made even mean really when fear is so subjective? Okay, so it's a little gimmicky, but there is technically some science behind this. So since 2020, there's this yearly thing called the Science of the Scare Project, where the hosts curate a list of around 40 horror movies and show them to a sample panel of 250 participants over a few weeks. Participants are fitted with heart rate monitors, and their heart rates are tracked throughout the duration of the film's runtimes, with an average resting heart rate taken from all participants, as well as a measurement of the highest heart rate spike. And since its introduction to the study for 2 years running now, Host, more than any other movie, has gotten the highest average heart rates of all movies tested. Ergo, the conclusion that it is scientifically the scariest film ever made. Now obviously, if we're to get pedantic with it, there's issues with that study. 250 isn't a particularly massive sample size to study on. I don't know for certain as I can't find exact figures, but I'm willing to bet that the participants weren't proportionately representative of the wide range of different nationalities and cultures that consume horror movies, aspects of which may determine how scary something is perceived to be. And also, 40 films is hardly exactly every horror movie. In fact, their list is kind of random and skewed towards more recent titles. For some reason, The Black Phone is on there, which, while I personally think it's a great movie, has never really been in the discussion for the label of scariest horror film ever. And there's plenty of notable, famously scary exclusions from the list, including Candyman, Pulse, Terrified. I could go on, but you get the idea. So like, it is science, there is an actual study being conducted here, and Host has come out on top multiple times, but it's kind of a bit of fun really. A more accurate descriptor of the study's results would be, Host is the scariest movie out of our curated list of 40 movies with a heavy recent Western title bias on average with the 500 people we've now tested this on, and so long as you assume heart rate is a true metric of fear and don't take into account other factors such as how long a movie stays with someone, the amount of sleep they lose because of it, if they develop any psychological effects or phobias as a result of its viewing or anything like that. But you know, it's not quite as catchy as scariest movie according to science. So now that we've got the whole premise out of the way I clickbaited you into watching the video with, how actually is the movie? Do I think it's the scariest movie ever made? And to answer that, maybe. Actually, I'd be lying if I didn't say I thought that Host was some scary shit. When it comes to scariest movie ever, I'm not sure, but it genuinely might be in the conversation. Fear, as I've already said, is such a totally subjective experience. I rarely get scared of movies, but I found Skinamarink to be terrifying. On the other hand, my friend, who I would say is quite easily scared of horror films and will often repeatedly jump in her seat and occasionally even scream at things we're watching together in moments that just kind of wash over me, is baffled that I could be scared of Skinamarink and doesn't get how that film is scary at all, describing the experience of watching it as being so boring she wanted to peel off her own eyelids just for something else to do. I'm horribly arachnophobic and terrified of spiders that can't hurt me, but not scared of heights, which arguably can. Fear isn't a one-size-fits-all thing that you can accurately measure and tick a box that says, yes, this is scary, no, not scary. But what I can say when it comes to Host is that it is very, very, very effective filmmaking. And for me, that effective filmmaking translates heavily into some really gripping tension, an engrossing watch, and some brilliant scares. It certainly evokes a feeling in me that I don't often get with horror films, and a lot of that, I believe, is just down to it being a really great film. Host is, on paper, a very simple movie. You could easily write this off as a screen recording of people screaming into webcams. You might call it a gimmick movie, something in the style of like Unfriended, but I think Host is a lot smarter than those movies, a lot more creative, and all on a budget 1/10 of the size. It makes a variety of intelligent creative decisions that could seem like just minor things, but go a long way in elevating the tension, the scares, and the audience investment. Even the story of its creation is kind of smart. Originally, Host started life as a viral prank director Rob Savage pulled on his friends, where during a group video chat, he staged a demonic attack from something living in his attic, and after uploading the prank online, it got a lot of attention. So he took this, and he and his producing partner and co-writer Jed Shepherd went around a bunch of places with no real pitch other than, look at this, give us a bunch of money, and trust us, we'll make something scary like this. And Shudder were the ones who eventually took the bait and give them a little bit of cash to put something together. So, with $100K of budget, Rob and his friends quickly got to work and made the whole thing in just 12 weeks before the UK was even out of lockdown. Capitalising on the zeitgeist of the moment with a clever film that channeled some of society's most pressing current anxieties into a tight horror feature that had to be directed online, with script lines being fed between improv on the fly through private messages while scenes were being shot. Old school techniques like fishing wire were being shipped to each actor's houses so they could practice pulling and moving objects mid-scene to simulate a haunting, and camera and lighting setups had to be coached through Zoom. It could have been absolute chaos, but Rob managed to wrangle the whole thing down into a brilliant horror story that, because of the conditions it was filmed in, and because of the conditions a significant portion of the world at large now found themselves in, it felt relevant, and dare I say scary, in a way we hadn't really seen before. The creative direction, structuring, and format of the film turned the limitations of its behind-the-scenes shooting methods not into a weakness, but into the movie's greatest strength. The simple setup is as follows, and it's one you all know because chances are you did it yourselves. A bunch of friends bored in lockdown arrange a group chat activity to catch up and pass the time together. We all did it. The family quizzes, the online board games. Maybe you did something a bit different and hosted a bingo night. For Haley, Gemma, Emma, Caroline, Teddy, and Redina, their let's do something a bit different moment is having a little seance, which is something that definitely could not go drastically wrong in any way. Obviously, I'm joking, it proceeds to go drastically wrong in every way. When one of the characters doesn't take the seance seriously, she accidentally invites into their world something unwanted, and with only their Zoom connection allowing them to reach out to one another, the group must try and survive what comes next. It might be a simple setup, but it's a really genius one, especially in terms of reflecting the time period it exists in. Like, let's host a seance sounds ridiculous in a lot of horror movies when there's some random spur-of-the-moment decision at a teen party, but let's host a seance because we're bored in lockdown is a thing that I am absolutely certain that people definitely did. And the reason I am absolutely certain people did it is because I know surprisingly multiple people who did exactly that. It's real weird. Honestly, it's like you don't watch horror movies. And so we're invited into this group of friends with a natural reason to get together. a natural reason to do the silly thing that kicks off all the problems, and even a natural reason to exposit to one another through dialogue that feels seamless and off the cuff, rather than blatantly expository. Characters naturally ask how each other is doing in lockdown. They joke about another character's new partner being a nightmare before he joins the call. They discuss with each other the latest issues in their friend group, like one of them being trapped in quarantine with a man they've now broken up with. The conversation ebbs and flows organically, and you learn so much about these people and their interwoven relationships, all the while just feeling like part of their friend group. And this is aided not just by the setup, but by the creative decision to cast a bunch of Rob's friends who all legitimately know and like each other in real life. They all use their real first names, so conversation doesn't feel like a performance so much as them just talking to their mates, and instead of having a hard script, the film was shot with a structure allowing them to comfortably improvise and just be guided by Rob's feedback on takes. The effect this creates is a feeling that you're watching a real group of friends. Because you are, on a real Zoom call. Because it is, having a real rapport with one another. Because they do. Compared to the stilted adults writing teens dialogue of similar screen life horror movies like Megan is Missing or Unfriended, it's night and day. This incredible chemistry makes our main cast immediately extremely likeable. They seem like a fun group, the kind you wouldn't mind going to the pub with. You immediately care about this friendship and the people in it because the nature of the Zoom call conversation in its naturalistic form makes you feel like you could just be there, just an extra attendee on mute who's accidentally clicked on the wrong meeting and ended up stumbling into some friends just having their weekly little catch-up. Everyone is commenting on what they're drinking, one group is playing with filters, another tells some jokes about their current living situation. It's cute, it's warm, it's cozy. It's all very familiar to anyone in 2020 who had a computer and an internet connection. And it's so natural in its performances and delivery that you don't even notice on a conscious level all the things it's doing. This first act is really smart in that it's doing so many things all at once. It's giving you the premise, it's developing these characters and getting you invested in them. It's setting up small stakes and points of interest like the recently split up couple. It's lulling you into this cozy familiar comfort, so when things start to go south there's a real sense of dread to it because you're already invested in this group and clinging on to that false sense of security the film initially gives you. And perhaps most impressively, it even foreshadows and sets up for almost every single major scare that comes in this film without you even noticing it's doing it by disguising each thing through normal, contextually relevant actions. I cannot stress how smartly this is done. What do I mean by that though? Well, let's give you some examples. Arguably spoilers here, so bear that in mind, but to be fair, I'm not going to give you the actual scares, I'm just going to point out some things. So Emma here mentions that she's going to have a drink for this because she's scared for the seance, and pulls out this glass. That glass is going to play a part in the scare. Regina has broken up with her boyfriend, but they have to live together in lockdown, and he leaves the room. That's a setup for a scare. Emma keeps mucking around with filters, setup for a scare. Haley takes a picture of the group uniting on her screen with an old Polaroid camera she dug out for the occasion. That Polaroid camera is going to be used for multiple scares. Caroline shows off a fun little video background you made. You better believe that's a scare. The film basically holds shit up to the camera back to back to back and tells its audience, hey, you, look at this. This is going to be important later. Rob, Jed and team check off so many guns here, they could open an armory. And it never once feels obnoxious because you don't even realize they're doing it. Like yeah, Haley takes a picture. That was a thing lots of people did for these kind of reunions. And who didn't have a friend on those calls that was overly keen on the filters? Who doesn't know someone who made a daft video background? What feels like just tiny little moments of banter and character development are actually doubling as foreshadowing in a way that when these big scares do come along, they feel earned and anticipated with great tension. I'll not spoil it for example, but the video background scare is exceptional. Because when that background plays again in the movie in a new context, just by virtue of having been introduced to it here, you know something is wrong. And it creates a real feeling of dread in the pit of your stomach. It is, brilliant. And the whole film is like that. A lot of people knock jump scares, but I think when they're done right, with the focus being inherently on the tension that comes before it and maintaining that tension after the release of the scare, jump scares can actually be handled really well. Host is a film that's pretty full of jump scares, and some people might write it off for that. But trust me when I say the jump scares in this movie are actually brilliant. They're always dispensed at just the right moment, always raising the level of intensity rather than offering a sudden and shocking relief from it. They're never cheap, they're always set up and followed with a palpable tension that never lets you go. I know I said I'm not sure I think this is the scariest movie ever made earlier, but to go back to that study, I can see why of the 500 participants now tested with it, that it always scores so highly in making their hearts race. It's a legitimately pretty terrifying movie with some smart, creative, and well set up frights that I personally think will leave a lasting impact on even some of the most hardened horror audiences, myself included. I love horror, that much should be obvious, but I'm rarely ever scared by it. I don't personally think a horror film has to be scary to succeed, and nor do I think its ability to scare an audience should at all be the metric by which we judge the quality of a horror film. But that said, when a horror is scary in that kind of fun, tingles up your spine kind of way, it is a nice bonus. And although it takes a lot for me to outrightly say I found a film scary, I'll happily say it for Host. It did at times genuinely frighten me, and I can count on maybe one hand the amount of films that have had that effect on me in the past 5 years. And on top of that, even without it being frightening, I'd still be singing this film's praises because I think it's got a hell of a lot going on for it besides that. The chemistry between the cast is electric and each person absolutely knocks their individual performances out the park. The moment-to-moment creativity on display for some of the key set pieces is brilliant and full of smart, clever and cool scares I've not seen done before, especially not on this smaller scale. The use of the filmmaking limitations to tell a unique story in a unique period of recent history was really compelling and thematically rich in that it kind of took the fears and anxieties of the time of feeling alone and cut off and separate from the people you love, only able to communicate with them through the screen, and amplified that anxiety by 100. Not only did these characters have that same isolation we were all going through, but that isolation is what prevents them all from helping each other, what keeps them trapped, what breaks down their communication and adds immensely to the difficulty of their situation. Now, to be fair, I'm not sure whether that's an accidental byproduct of the situation they had to shoot in by necessity, or if it was the authorial intent, but I don't actually need to speculate on that, because, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, please welcome to the show co-writer of the movie Host, Jed Shepherd! Fair warning before we cut this interview, I didn't want to scare the guy, so I did have to put on my human skin makeup for the call, in case you're wondering why I look a little bit different. Hi Jed, and welcome to the channel.
Hey Daniel, thanks for having me.
So, what I would like to know is, you know, I've kind of talked about how he's kind of tapped into this, like, this feeling of the lockdown, this vibe of, you know, let's get together for a board game night, or a film night, or in this case, a seance. It felt very lockdown and of the times all the way through. Was that a wonderful byproduct of just the nature of making art, or was that something that you consciously had in mind while you put it together?
Some of the stuff you mentioned was intentional, the feedback loop. Some of it was a happy accident or was discovered like on set, for instance, like the elbow bump. That was all Haley and her boyfriend. The five main ladies should really get co-writing credit on this,
right?
And like because they brought so much of themselves into it. So much of the dialogue is real stuff that they have said. I mean, we know them so well, so it's very easy to write for them as well because we know the group dynamic. Mm-hmm. And that dynamic you see, yeah, again, because it happened in the lockdown, we just used what was around us. So it wasn't just because it was a lockdown, but like Host wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a pandemic as well. We just wouldn't have come up with it. So sometimes these things happen, and there's lightning in the bottle, and much as we think we could, we would never be able to repeat Host. We'll make something equally as good but different.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no way we will ever come up with something like Host again. It's a moment in time that is like, yeah, we capture the zeitgeist that, like, without, you know, thinking about it too much. One of the things I always do is try and marry something which was a classic horror trope with like something new. So I mix a seance with Zoom, and I just messaged Robin just with 2 words, and I just said Zoom seance, and I went to sleep. And the next day I woke up, and he was like, yeah, this is all we need. This is perfect. So all these people came along and said, no, yeah, we're really, really interested. We love this, but we want you to do it after the pandemic. And Shudder were the only one who was just like, yeah, we'll give you the money now. We'll leave you alone, which is what they did. They
That's
just
brilliant.
let us get on with it.
Please follow Jed Shepherd on all of his socials.
Oh, yeah, please do.
Would you like to plug them? I'm assuming it's just Jed Shepherd everywhere.
It's just Jed Shepherd. Yeah, that's it. JedSheperd everywhere. And I'm trying to wean myself off social media, so I might not post as much as I once did, but when I do post, it's always a banger. So
awesome.
So stay tuned.
Yeah. Follow Jed Shepherd everywhere he goes. He's a very talented man. Him and his writing partner Rob Savage, and basically apparently every single person he's friends with, because they're a talented bunch of people. And he was very, very lovely to come on for you guys today. So show your appreciation by following his career religiously. He's very good, and you will only receive good things in return. That was a really cool insight. Thank you so much, Jed, for agreeing to be interviewed for this video. If you're interested, you can actually catch my full unedited conversation on horror, filmmaking, and all that wonderful stuff with Jed on my Patreon, which again, all money from this month will go towards Trans Lifelines. So if you want to pick up a perk and support a good cause, that's an option for you. Though I would say do prioritize a direct donation at the link below if you can, because that way the charity gets a little bit more money, as Patreon won't take a cut. Anyway, to finish with one last point on my analysis, one thing I really, really, really appreciate about this film that I just want to highlight and celebrate as much as possible, and it's something me and Jed touched upon in our full interview. It knows when to stop. This film is less than an hour long. To some, that might be a turn-off. To me, it's the absolutely perfect length for this film. The general marketable target runtime for a movie that isn't connected to some bigger franchise with bloated 3-hour runtimes is around 90 minutes. I have no doubt in my mind Rob and his team could have made a 90-minute movie with this premise. They clearly knew what they were doing and could film fairly cheap, and I highly doubt it's due to budget as to why the film runs so short. I'm almost certain they could have absolutely arbitrarily extended the runtime by padding the thing out with a bit of a slower start, a few more scares of things moving here and there, and a great deal more screaming, but they didn't. And I think they didn't because they didn't want to cheapen it. 57 minutes is the absolute perfect length for this thing. It is tight, without feeling rushed. Everything included, every scene, every bit of dialogue, every character feels like they have a right to be there. No one is on screen for more than they need to be. Nothing is dragged out for longer than it should be. It is a movie that sets you up, starts fast and hard, knows exactly when to stop, and doesn't overstay its welcome. And my God, is that a great decision. There's probably an easily achievable 90-minute cut of this film, but it would be an infinitely worse cut, I'm sure. The film gets so much out of its short runtime, leaves a profound impression, and like a great magician who doesn't want to perform the same act on repeat to diminishing applause, gets the hell out of Dodge before you have a chance to become immune to its tricks. It even has the brilliant narrative excuse to do this with the Zoom-free meeting timer running out, which is just, oh, what a nice little cherry on top. Host is well worth watching. It's probably the best horror film to come out of that strange period of making films under COVID restrictions. In fact, it's probably one of the best films to come out under those restrictions in general. There was a lot of crap came out around that time period as productions tried to shamelessly capitalize on the climate of the era, but for every songbird or corona zombies, there was something with a genuine creative vision actively engaging with the world's current anxieties in a clever and cathartic way, and working within these limitations to produce genuinely fantastic pieces of art. You had Mythic Quest's COVID episode, you had Bo Burnham's Insight, and I would argue you had Rob Savage and Jed Shepherd's Host. It's a great film on its own, but is one of the few true creative endeavours to come out of and reflect such a shitty period for everyone. It's also kind of a culturally important one. And maybe it's the scariest film ever made. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. Anyway, that's all I have time for today, but before I go, I mentioned earlier that I had some cool bits to talk about. Now, I've already covered the charity stuff, so I'll not retread the same ground there, other than to say, if you're happy and able to, please donate to Trans Lifeline using any of the donation links on this page. But in news unrelated to this month's charity efforts, if you're a fan of horror and would like to dive deeper into the lost decade of 90s horror, then your humble little skeleton fella here can hook you up. In Search of Darkness, the award-winning Fangoria-nominated documentary series that dove into 80s horror for nearly 15 hours of gory goodness, has entered a new decade with its first 90s entry, In Search of Darkness 1990 to 1994, which I am truly delighted to announce that this guy is a credited advisor on. And as an advisor, I've been given a cheeky little discount code that gets you 10% off this killer upcoming doc on purchase. It's honestly going to be amazing. The In Search Of series always knocks it out the park, so if that seems like something you're interested in, then info and the code is in the description below. And if you buy through this code, not only will you get a sweet ass doc on an underexplored period of horror, you'll also be supporting yours truly. Just for full clarity, again, this is not connected to this month's charity efforts. Just making that clear. I became involved with In Search of 90s after I'd already planned Wholesome Halloween and the charity event for this year, and it just so happens that October is when their campaign is running. So while this is very cool, again, it's a totally separate thing. I apologize in advance that I'm going to make that clear every single one of these videos, so apologies if you have to hear that 31 times this month, but I just don't want any muddying of the waters on that and having people accidentally think they're somehow supporting a charity with that purchase, because I don't want to be predatory on people's goodwill in any capacity, not even accidentally. It will be an awesome movie, and using my discount code will support me directly, just to be clear, but yeah, totally separate from this month's Trans Lifeline support. Also, if all goes well, I am once again running to be this year's Face of Horror. Assuming I am still in the running at the time of this video's release, be sure to vote for me at the link in the description, where you'll get one free vote every single day. And you can also buy more votes if you wish to support me further, and should you do so, your money will help the B+ Foundation, which is a charity that helps fight childhood cancer. Patreon money and ad revenue for this month though, as well as your lovely donations, will of course still be going straight to supporting Trans Lifeline. Whew. Okay. I think that's everything. I know I'm giving you guys a lot to work with here, but what can I say? October is a damn busy month for skeletons. Other than that, you know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe to my OnlyDans at the red button below. Hit the bell so you don't miss anything, and check out the bunch of links and stuff in the description for my Patreon, In Search of 90s, maybe Face of Horror voting if I got in and I'm still in. Make of all that lovely stuff what you will. So glad to have you all back for a new marathon, and I will see you all again tomorrow.